This is peak wilderness survival. Armed with nothing but a pair of shorts, he'll live in the wild for 3 months. He'll make charcoal from scratch, smelt iron ore, and forge all sorts of iron tools, all to build a sturdy shelter. It all started when our guy, Old Ma, had a fight with his wife. In a rage, he stormed out with nothing. He found a slice of paradise by the water and decided to make it his new home. The only problem? The ceiling is a bit low for our 5'3" hero. And with no tools, he was powerless against the rock. So, his next move is to craft some gear for himself. First up, he gathers some vines from the trees. He pins them down with his size 6 feet. And half an hour later, he's woven a handy basket. Since he left in such a hurry, he forgot his shoes. So Old Ma just whips himself up a pair of stylish, all-natural flip-flops. Now properly shod, Old Ma moves with newfound speed to forge iron. You first need a blower. Old Ma cuts a rectangular piece of bark, splits a branch down the middle, clamps the bark inside, and ties it all together. Let's test it out. Not bad. He sketches out the blower's housing and collects clay from the riverbank. He molds the clay into the shape of the casing. He carves out a stone to serve as a bearing for the axle. Next, he needs to seal the top. An airtight seal is key for maximum airflow. With that done, he can build the furnace right next to the outlet. This dense, gray clay is perfect for the furnace walls, ensuring they won't crack from the heat. Finally, he builds up the furnace walls. Making fire with a bow drill? That's child's play for Old Ma. He starts with a perforated stone, using it as a weight on top of the spindle. Then he weaves a tough cord from tree bark, pulling it back and forth makes the spindle rotate at high speed. He sharpens a small stone, fixing it to the bottom to act as a drill bit. He uses this to bore a perfect hole in a piece of wood. He assembles all the parts, creating a highly efficient, labor-saving fire-starting tool. Satisfied with his work, Old Ma pulls out a lighter and sparks up a flame. He transfers the flame to the furnace, cranks up the heat, and bakes the damp clay dry. Later, Old Ma finds a coconut in the river. The meat is gone, but it'll make a perfect container. This red mud seeping from the riverbank is rich in iron oxide, one of the first materials humans ever used to make iron. He mixes the clay with charcoal to help it hold its shape and heat up. Then he stirs in the iron-rich mud. He then rolls the mixture into small balls, ready for the furnace. Since iron smelting requires a massive amount of charcoal, Old Ma decides to build a proper charcoal kiln first. He leaves a few holes at the bottom for good airflow, allowing the wood to combust. He then stacks the kiln with wood. Once that's done, he seals the outside with mud. Next, he lights the wood inside. After it burns for about an hour, he seals up the entire kiln. This enclosed, oxygen-starved environment prevents the wood from burning to ash, leaving behind pure carbon. With a fresh supply of charcoal, Old Ma can finally start smelting his ore pellets. He cranks the blower, forcing air into the furnace to steadily raise the temperature. The powerful draft gets the charcoal burning at over 1000 degrees Celsius. The pellets are quickly roasted to a tender, glowing red. He cools them with some vintage 82 spring water. Cracking them open reveals small nuggets of crude iron. They're small, but hey, iron is iron. Not a single piece can be wasted. Next, Old Ma needs a crucible to melt the iron. He mixes clay with crushed charcoal. The charcoal helps prevent cracking and forms it into a cup shape. The addition of charcoal powder helps prevent it from cracking. He places the newly formed crucible into the furnace to fire it and set its shape. The firing process takes 3 to 4 hours. The next day, he takes out the cooled crucible. He fills the furnace with more charcoal, and once it's glowing hot, he adds the iron nuggets he collected earlier. This process also takes several hours. He periodically checks to see how his iron is doing. After a long 5 hours of firing, the dull, dark iron has transformed into glowing, molten gold. He shapes a block of clay and carves out the shape of a knife blade. He hollows out the inside of the pattern, creating a simple mold. Time for the tricky part. A burn from this would be more than just a little blister. He carefully pours the molten iron into the mold. Not a single drop can go to waste. Rapidly cooling the metal makes it incredibly hard. This process is called quenching. Now all that's left is a tiny bit of grinding. With the hand speed he's developed over 20 years of being single, Old Ma successfully polishes the dull iron to a brilliant shine. If an archaeologist found this, they would probably spend years studying it. But you think he's done? Not even close. Old Ma is just getting started on his iron working journey. This guy's on another level. From start to finish. He's absolutely incredible. It's around noon. So Old Ma decides to catch some fish for lunch. Using a technique that looks suspiciously like knitting, he crafts some amazing fish traps. He baits them with river snails, and places them strategically where the fish are likely to swim. After waiting for, 48 minutes, Old Ma finally harvests a few small fish. He quickly fashions a makeshift grill, and throws the fish on, guts and all, to cook. It's barely enough for a snack. But Old Ma is satisfied. It's great for maintaining his 8-pack, after all. Next, he will start building the shelter. Old Ma is a man of high standards. Before construction, he gives the rock a thorough high-temperature sterilization. Next is to knock off these protruding rocks. His homemade tools work like a charm. The stubborn rocks give way one after another. Soon, he's carved out enough space to lie down. But sitting on it is a real pain in the butt. So he fetches some organic, free-range mud to smooth the floor. Then retrieves some flat stone slabs from the river to lay as tiles. With Old Ma's masterful arrangement, each slab fits so perfectly. It's as if they were made for it. It's so satisfying. It could cure a 10-year-old case of OCD. Finished, he lies down in serene comfort. To make it easier to fell trees, Old Ma still needs to forge an axe. Who knew this little blower could generate such a powerful blast? First, Old Ma carves an axe head shape into a block of clay. Over here, the iron has completely melted. He carefully removes the crucible and pours the molten iron into the mold. Old Ma carefully controls the flow of the molten iron. He then takes out the cooled axe head. And then, of course, it's time for another frantic polishing session. The polished axe head is fitted into a perfectly sized wooden handle, and then he secures it with a chaotic but effective lashing. And just like that, a genuine, wilderness-forged battle axe makes its badass debut. Old Ma eagerly tests out his new axe, felling pine trees with ease. As a master wilderness carpenter, even with just a simple axe, Old Ma can square up a log perfectly. He measures out the lengths with his fingers, ensuring an accuracy of within 1 millimeter. Finally, a well-placed stomp with his size 6 foot snaps the wood clean in two. Then he cuts notches at both ends to help the logs get to know each other better. He uses a chisel to make a hole in the middle, and finally inserts some wooden pegs. This is the famous mortise and tenon joint. Houses built this way can stand for 1,000 years without falling. Old Ma moves the completed frame into position by the rock face. It's not a huge space, but it's plenty for a single guy like him. Next is to build the walls on the frame. First, he cuts the wood into 20 centimeters lengths. Then, he smooths the surface. His axe may look primitive, but it works just as well as anything from a hardware store. Quickly, he turns the logs into a stack of wooden bricks. He uses a chisel to create 2 holes, and inserts wooden pins to join them. These are the wooden bricks used to make the wall. Although the production is very tedious, the good thing is that the shelter made this way is extremely sturdy. It'll have no problem lasting for decades. Next is the assembly phase. First, he chisels corresponding holes in the base. Then he pegs the bricks into place. This process looks complicated. And trust me, it is. The mortise holes have to be perfectly sized. Too big and the wall will be wobbly. Too small and the tenons won't fit. To keep the interior dry, Old Ma starts a small fire in the corner. Next, he tackles the other half of the wall. Old Ma prepares a longer timber For the door frame. After fixing the door frame in place, the basic shape of the shelter is now complete. He decides not to build the walls any higher. After all, that rock ceiling isn't getting any softer. Next, a wooden door is needed. Old Ma gets to work on a pile of timbers for the door. Looking at all these wood chips, you have to wonder. He's definitely not following any deforestation laws out here. He lays out the planks, then attaches a wooden pivot, sharpened at both ends. Old Ma inspects his work, and gives it his seal of approval. Truly the work of a master carpenter with 2.5 years of experience. He chisels a socket into the threshold, and in the same position directly above, he chisels another one. He then slots the door's pivots into the sockets, and the door is installed. He tries it out. It swings smoother than silk. Next up, let's see how he builds the roof. First, he uses wood to build a frame. Then he retrieves flat stones from the river to use as shingles, using a small stick as a measuring guide. He marks out perfect rectangles. For the sake of aesthetics, his tolerance is less than a millimeter. Then he uses his knife to chip off the excess parts at the edge. Old Ma's craftsmanship is next level awesome. He drills a hole in each shingle and threads a cord through it for tying it down. He ties the shingles directly onto the roof beams, overlapping each one. Luckily, the rock already covers most of the roof area. This saved Old Ma a lot of time. Soon the roof is built. Finally, Old Ma has a proper roof over his head. To celebrate, he excitedly digs some fat grubs out of a tree. Not only are they packed with protein, they're also incredibly delicious. Grilling them is clearly the best way to enjoy them. With a full belly, he's about to have the best night's sleep he's had in months. Living so close to the water, Old Ma is constantly getting his shorts wet. To make getting around easier, he decides to build a bridge across the stream. So Old Ma gets to chopping down enough timber to earn him 10 years in the slammer. First, he gives each log a full spade exfoliation. He chisels out mortises, inserts crossbeams, and pegs them in place. Old Ma made 3 such frames. After dragging them into the water, he uses vines to pull one of them up. It's tough work for one person, but where there's a will, there's a way. After both sides are fixed, he places the 3rd frame on top. It just goes to show. Master a little physics and you can take on the world. Old Ma successfully built a sturdy bridge pier. Next, he just needs to lay the bridge deck on top. A bridge, a stream, a home. Isn't this the rustic dream house you've always wanted? To celebrate the completion of his shelter, Old Ma gives his fish a fancy, gourmet plating. Today, he's maxing out his calorie stats. As a new homeowner, a little ceremony is definitely in order. Enjoying delicious fried fish in his own cozy home. You couldn't trade this life for an apartment in Shanghai.